Hi, I'm Ashley Hammond.
And I'm Locke Hammond.
We're married.
We run a business together.
And we homeschool our 4 kids.
That makes us sound a little crazy.
I think people might think we're a little crazy.
Well, through all that crazy, we're here to help you blaze your own trail through a world designed for conformity.
And break the chains holding you back from living an uncommon life.
This is Trailblazers and Chainbreakers. All right, we have a quote to start us off today. It's a parenting quote, I guess, but I feel like it's more, you're laughing at me already.
I guess.
I feel like it's more of a general kind of, I don't know, I guess we'll explain. I'm going to let you read it instead of babbling on about it, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second after you read it. People are probably like wondering what the hell we're talking about anyways. We've already lost half the people listening.
No, we haven't. Hey, friends, it's been a while.
Okay.
We'll start off with that. Hey.
All right. Read us the quote, Ashley.
Your calm, centered presence is the greatest gift you can give your child in times of emotional storms.
Yeah. I love this quote, partially because I think it's so true, but also partially because I need the reminder very constantly. We actually kind of just needed the reminder before even recording this. Well, I'll let you tell that story in a second then if you want. Let me explain my rambling intro. I feel like this is more than just a parenting quote. When I saw this, I thought to myself, like, yes, absolutely how I should be showing up for my kids, but also how I should be showing up for you as my wife. I think the quote could easily just take out your child, and it would read, your calm and centered presence is the greatest gift you can give in times of emotional storms. Because I feel like that's just as important for you. And maybe we can expand on that a little bit later. But this has been front and center in my mind lately. I think your mind as well. And like we said, we were just talking about this from a bunch of different angles and just needed this reminder with one of our kids, if not 3 or 4 of our kids, maybe all of our kids. I needed it today. I don't know about you, but what are your thoughts when you hear that?
I mean, absolutely. I've seen it in real time, like just speaking of like something that just happened, but just in general, there are, we're all different. So each kid hits us in a different way. And I know for me, I can get like really worked up after repeating myself over and over and over again. And if I come at that hot, emotional, then what do you think happens in return from whichever child that I'm doing that with, regardless of their personality?
Throwing fuel on the fire.
Yeah, it's the same thing in marriage, like you said, right? Like if I come in hot towards you and emotional and like, you're gonna get reactive and you're gonna be defensive. And so I wish I could remember the quote, and I can't, so I'm gonna get off of that. But just for instance, like we just had a child, we won't name names, one of our children. They do like the same thing every day, right? For like years. They know what's expected of them. They know what is to be done for like schooling and homeschooling, and it's not really too much to ask. And yet certain children you just have to remind over and over again. Sorry, you might hear our kids actually screaming in the background.
They're going nuts downstairs.
Yeah, they live here too. Anyways, you ask over and over again, and it's like, ooh, butterfly, shiny object, like just in one ear and out the other. And like it's okay to get frustrated, but the way you handle it is just huge. And like coming at them frustrated or yelling or just threatening is not gonna make them move faster or do the thing that you're trying to get them to do.
Yeah. I needed you just before we started recording this. I'm going downstairs to check and make sure that this kid is doing what they need to do, schoolwork, housework, kind of stuff that they need to get done. I've asked them to do this one child 20, like not even exaggerating, 27 times in the past hour. Like, hey, don't forget to do this. Hey, don't forget to do this. Hey, you're not listening to me. Please look at me. Listen, I'm trying to help you. Here's what I need you to do. Ready? Go. And I was like, right before we started recording, I was like, I'm just going to go downstairs and make sure she's actually doing it. And you needed to say, Did you say be kind or be gentle? I don't remember which one you said.
I think I said be kind.
Okay, either word is fantastic. I needed that reminder because in my head I was like, "Yep, I was coming in hot. I was not going to be gentle." And so if I came downstairs, even if you might make the argument like, "Oh, well, you need to raise your voice so she starts listening." I disagree, but I used to believe that, strategically not staying calm for the show of it to get their attention, kind of thing. But if I went in hot, if I went in angry, if I went in yelling or condescending or whatever it is, it would not have helped her. She would have just exploded either back at me or because of me, or she would have shut down. The only thing, and it's not even an emotional storm for her, which we can talk about when our kids are having their own emotional storms, but just staying calm and centered in my interactions with her, despite my frustrations, is really, really important. Not to mention because when I went down there, she was actually doing what she was supposed to, but I would have been coming down like looking for the problem, ready to just be angry. So yeah, I think this is important, whether it's emotional storms, whether she's having an emotional storm or not, is to not, it reminds me of another quote, and I don't remember who this one is from. The first quote, I don't think we said this, is from a woman named Carla Naumberg. The second one, kids need you to lend your calm, not add to their chaos. Mm-hmm. That one feels very appropriate for what was just going on. It still is chaos right now. It was chaos. But she and all of our kids, she needed me to bring calm to the situation of her chaos. She's a kid. There's naturally chaos going on with her. So I think that reminder that you gave me was both beautiful and loving from you, instead of you being like, "Oh, hey, don't go be an a-hole." Like, you said it very well, but it was also very needed on my part. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in two parents being able to lovingly correct or remind each other in a way that isn't basically making the other one feel like they're useless or a piece of crap or doing something horribly wrong. Like, you probably saw it and you could have gone the other road and either waited for me to handle it wrong and then yelled at me for that, or spoken to me very condescendingly or rudely and be like, "Don't be a jerk like you usually are," or whatever. And you could have, caused an issue between you and I, but you're probably pretty sick of me coming into a situation hot, but you also understand you can't do that and expect me to calm down, right? Like, your ultimate goal is to get me to handle the situation with her well. And so you need to handle the situation with me well. And, I think that's beautiful when two parents can do that, which we struggle with sometimes.
Yeah, we do. And with that being said, I was like, be calm, but also be firm. I'm not like, oh, just like whatever, and just like go down there and be like, "Oh, you haven't done your stuff yet." Like, if she wasn't doing it, oh, that's cool. Like, there's a difference between like just letting it go and just like ignoring it versus like being kind and being firm with her, because she does need that. She needs kindness and love, but she also needs you to stay firm in what you're saying and not just like change directions or change what you were asking of her.
Boundaries and structure. And yeah.
And I was just as annoyed as you, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, I was in the middle of this too, just as annoyed. I was just staying quiet.
Yeah, I just think like there's something amazing in the ability to, you can see me and we know each other well enough that you're like, "Yep, he's upset. He's not amused." And you can see that, and you can see it with love and also maybe a little strategy, understanding that responding rudely to me will not get your desired outcome. But you can see that with love, and you can like kindly, like the way you said it, your tone of voice was not annoyed that I was about to go mishandle something. And I think that is really an important lesson, to be able to, for two people to be able to do that, to see each other's flaws and help them with them without getting frustrated that it's literally the 150th time this year that you've had to do something like that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to say something else, like this original quote where it it ends with "in times of emotional storms," it obviously creates a picture of like an upset child. And something that was, I wanted to start off with this early on in the conversation, because something that was really hard for me, and I think that probably a lot of dads, but it could be moms and dads listening. If you're a problem solver, this is probably going to speak to you. My reaction, and we just had a conversation about this as well right before the podcast, my reaction to problems, so upset child, arguing kids, whatever it is to try and fix the problem, not to necessarily explore how one party is feeling or what happened or what led us there. It's like straight to the point. Where's the solution? We've solved it. Now, why is everybody still upset? And I need to say this to myself as much as anybody else who's a problem solver who maybe can relate to that. This isn't as simple as like seeing your kid in an emotional storm, staying calm and centered, and saying, it's okay, we can fix this. It's not. The urge to stay calm and centered, to give that presence to your kids, has nothing to do with fixing anything. Maybe sometimes you are going to fix a problem, but usually it's the calm and centered presence. It's not the solution, right? Sometimes it involves sitting in the shit that they're feeling with them, knowing that you can't fix it, or what's even worse than can't fix it for me is can fix it, but shouldn't. Yeah. Because they need to either learn to fix it themselves or learn to process what they're feeling. Is just being there with them sometimes. That's so hard for me. I feel, to be completely honest and a little vulnerable, like when you, Ashley, or our kids are upset, a little part of me, like my inner child, feels unsafe. Like something life-threatening is going to happen and I need to resolve the problem before I die, or someone kills me, or someone leaves and that's going to kill, right? Like the very emotional, not logical at all, inner child kind of stuff. And it's really hard for me to sit with an upset, not even like a screaming crying, just like a softly crying kid is still really hard for me. And I have a lot of theories why, and we don't have to go into that, but sometimes that's what we have to do. Sometimes that's the calm and centered presence. Like I need to show up, not problem solver mode, but just don't lose my own crap because I feel unsafe because a child is crying or you are crying. Yeah. Right? Like that was hard for me too when you're crying. So problem solving is great. It's a superpower. It helps us, whether dad or mom, problem solvers. And it's something you should be proud of, but it's also something that you can overuse. And in this situation, in this specific quote, it's calm and centered presence, not calm and centered problem solving. It's just your presence. It's just calm and centered presence.
I just think that that's just so hard for a lot of people. It's really, if you notice, like even a grown-up crying, it makes the other grown-up really uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And like they want to fix this somehow. Like you always hear like, oh, don't cry, it's okay. And it's like they're not saying that because they feel bad necessarily. They're saying that because it's making them feel a certain way. It's making that other person feel really uncomfortable. Like, and I mean, there's so many, like what you said, there's so many places that comes from, like not being able to cry or have your own emotions when you were a child or whatever it is. I know for me, it makes me extremely uncomfortable when our kids are crying. Not so much like crying, like quietly crying, but like tantrum crying. Yeah. Especially at the age where like most of the time you're like, what the heck? That doesn't even make sense. Like why? What just happened?
There was one the other day, one of the kids dropped a carrot on the floor and just lost it. And I'm looking at the situation like there's a whole bag of carrots literally in front of your face on the counter right now.
Yeah.
Like if that carrot got hairy on the floor and is gross, we can either rinse it off, or if that's not good enough for you, we can get in. Like, why are you screaming?
And so those are the situations that I struggle with. But me coming in not calm, or not trying to help that child through that, or figure it out on their own, like be upset about the carrot that they dropped on the floor, and then they can figure out on their own that like, hey, they can rinse it off, Or B, but there's more carriage, like what you just said.
Yeah.
Like if we just sweep in and come and fix it and be like, oh, don't worry, there's more carrots, or we can just rinse it off. Or we do the other thing, which is like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's no big deal. Like, get over it. Neither of those reactions are teaching anything. And they're actually invalidating everything that they're feeling. And also, you're not teaching them a valuable lesson. Like, you're not, there's nothing being learned in that situation. And you're just basically like shutting down their emotions.
Yeah. And anybody who is frustrated with the state of our world and country right now can see that those two things are huge problems with adults. So sweeping in and fixing the problem, and coming in and shaming the emotion out of it, right? So we have multiple generations, I was going to say a generation, multiple generations of people in this world who think that other people need to come solve all their problems.
Yeah.
And we also have a huge problem with people being unable to comprehend and understand and handle people who feel differently than them, where coming in and just shutting something down is just completely normal. Like, nope, you're dead to me. You think that? See ya. Or like expressing emotions is weak. So there's all kinds of things that we can see like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Like, well, no, we're seeing the problem with doing these things over years manifest in the adult population in the world right now.
Yeah. And just like even thinking about like with a child, like we have all different children. We have a child that will like drop a glass of milk. And this reminds me of like my stress response as an adult, but like we'll drop a glass of, I said milk, but I meant like water, and just stand there and
watch
like,
it.
Who is coming in to clean that up? Like, it's not like I'm not coming to clean that up. Like you're capable of cleaning up your own mess. So it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you going to do something about that? But then like most parents will either get mad and yell,
or they'll just clean it up.
Or they'll just go and clean it up. Yeah. And it's like, no, like clean that mess up. And you don't have to guilt and shame that child for just standing there, but be like, hey, like what happens when we spill stuff? Like, it's okay that you spilled that, but what do you do when you spill something?
Right. Common-centered presence would be, hey, why don't you go get a towel, please? And like, instead of like, I'm not cleaning up your mess, it would be like, hey, can you come help me, please? Right? Yeah. Like, these are all things I needed to learn for this specific problem in our house, where it's like a cup of water spilled on the table and the child is just standing there watching the water puddle slowly approach everything else on the table. And I'm like, you gonna do it again?
What are we doing?
Yeah. Something that comes to mind is something that one of the guys in one of the men's groups that I run brought up, and this phrase has just stuck with me since he said it, and I'll explain it. But the phrase is, his goal is to just don't be a dick. And I laugh because it's a memorable way of putting it. But his idea, like this, I think really like sums up my experience with this whole topic on so many levels. But there's so many times when my kids have been upset, and my response to that was for me to lose control, right? Like they lost their stuff, so I lost my stuff. Or they're upset about something, complaining, and I come in and snap at them and create a whole kind of storm of a whole mess. And what his point was when he was sharing this with me was like, we can go into situations like spilled water. Let's use that because we were just talking about that. We can go into those situations and we can try and hit a home run. We can try and show up perfectly. We can try and be the hero. But that's really hard to do. Like, we're upset, we're emotional, we're frustrated. And so a lot of times if you're trying to be the hero, you're going to fall short, get frustrated, and then just there comes your frustration, and then you really screw it up. Instead of the goal being to try and be the hero, his goal is to just not screw it up. Just don't be a jerk. And so coming into this spilled water situation, it's like calm and centered, not snappy and angry, not grumpy, not stomping around the house. Just stay calm and centered so that they understand it's okay, like you said, and here's what we need from you. And those moments are going to add up. And if you think about like I guess an example is compound interest. They're going to compound over time. But if you lose your stuff and you act like a total jerk and you explode and you fly off the handle, that is going to do 100 times more damage to the relationship to the child than handling it well would do, or even handling it like a hero would do. Handling it like a hero would obviously be a benefit, but it's going to be far outweighed by the detriment of you exploding on a child. And so just not being a jerk, not losing your stuff on the kid, I think that was a phrase that stuck with me and is still in my head as we're talking about this.
Yeah. Well, what you're teaching them, if you come in emotional, like yelling or making them afraid, and the child already like freezes and doesn't like do anything about it, you're making that issue even worse. Like you're hammering at it more. So like when they're a grown up and a stressful situation happens, they're like completely not going to know how to handle it or deal with it because of just got pounded into their brain when they were young, when a stressful situation happened. If they're already naturally doing that, like they're naturally just like, when something stressful happens, well, that's already a natural part of who they are. So if you pound it in a little bit more and you come in yelling at them or what did you do or look what you did or whatever it is that you do, like, or you fix it, then they expect in a stressful situation always for somebody to come and fix it.
Yeah.
So I think it's more impactful than we think. And I don't think we realize how much these little situations or these little scenarios that happen throughout our day impact and have to do with what they're going to be or how they're going to react when they're older.
Absolutely. I think you and I both talked about crying. There's another great quote about crying that I forget when we first heard it. You might have shared it with me at some point, and it really hit me hard because it completely challenges the way I thought about our kids crying. I thought, so I don't want to blame it completely on being a guy, but I think it's probably a more common problem for guys. But just in general, a lot of people see crying and emotions as weakness. And that was definitely how I felt growing up. But here's a quote. It's from a woman named Pam Leo. It says, "It's not our job to stop children from crying." And this is me speaking for a second, either by fixing it or by yelling at them. "It's not our job to stop children from crying. The crying is the healing, not the hurting. When we stop children from crying, they have to stuff their hurt inside instead of releasing it." And that one really, to be honest, made me feel guilty at first because of how I've handled things, but has really changed how I see things. Like the crying is the healing, not the hurting. Yeah. I think that's really powerful.
Well, if there's an emotion there, you got to think if there's an emotion there and they're upset and they're crying and you say, stop crying, or it's stupid that you're crying, or whatever it is that you're saying.
Or even just fix the situation.
They're just stopping out of guilt and shame. They're not stopping because they want to stop. They're stopping because somebody told them that it was bad or wrong to do that. And so, like, the feeling or whatever it is that happened is still there, but they're just shoving it down.
Yeah.
And suppressing it.
Yeah. Well, we had this situation. I guess I had this situation with one of our kids yesterday, where the other piece to this is what they're crying about is not necessarily what they're crying about, if that makes sense. So the surface level or the last thing that happened is not, actually, I don't even want to say not always, usually not what they're actually upset about. And this is probably true for you and me, and we still don't even know this, but I'll give you the example from yesterday. So we got home and one of our kids was upset, and they asked us for something for a snack. I think it was ice cream sandwiches. And we're like, well, you had them yesterday, so maybe not today. And this kid got really upset about that answer. And a couple other things happened, and she came upstairs and was in her room. And we had just gotten home. We hadn't seen him for a little while. So I came upstairs and I wanted to spend some time with her. So I went in and I started talking to her. And it was like peeling an onion. And it's like, you seem really mad at me about the ice cream sandwiches. And we talked about that for a second. And it turns out that, she just randomly goes from ice cream sandwiches and starts talking about something else that happened. And I was like, oh, that sounds really frustrating, which is a new skill for me to be able to validate and empathize with emotions. I'm like, that sounds really frustrating. I get why you're upset. And, at the same time, do you understand why the other person did that? And we're talking about that. We're having a conversation. And then she magically changes the subject to something else that happened a little bit earlier. And she did this 3 or 4 times more. And after whatever that was, 5, 6 times, 5, 6 levels deep, 5, 6 layers of the onion, we get to what I think was actually the problem, which was one of our sisters had been sick that morning. And she felt like she actually said something like, she's getting all the attention and she should because she's sick. I get that. But it makes me feel like nobody's paying attention to me. Mm-hmm. And all of these things compounded on top of it. And what she was, ostensibly crying about was not being able to have an ice cream sandwich 2 days in a row, which not even being emotionally involved in the situation just sounds ridiculous. Yeah. Right. But that's not what she was crying about. And if I had been like, dude, stop crying, that's ridiculous, and I'd shut it down, I never would have been able to get however many levels deep to the real problem. She never would have felt heard. All the things we've been talking about already, but also we never would have actually known what was going on, and what was going on was very valid and very legitimate. And so then problem solver dad can come in, and I was like, I was able to come up with a solution. It's like, well, we just had some snow yesterday. Part of what she wanted people to go do with her that felt like she wasn't getting attention was to go sledding. And I was like, all right, I'll go sledding with you. Let's go. But if I had done that in the beginning, it would have completely missed those 7 levels, and I wouldn't have actually known what was going on. She wouldn't have known what was going on. By the end of that, she understood what she had been feeling and battling and working through, and she got to see the kind of the dots connect.
It's so interesting how that works.
Yeah, but I had to let her cry, and I had to sit with her and hold her while she was crying. And in my head, I'm screaming, and my skin is crawling. Not actually skin crawling, but you know what I mean? It's hard.
Well, so it goes back to what the certain age that I struggle with a lot is the little age where they have these big emotions, but they cry about what seems like nothing. And what you said, seems like nothing, surface level. They're little, they're crying, although these little brains have really big emotions and their brains are changing rapidly. So it is a big deal to them. It's rapid. I can only imagine how their brains are, because they're just changing and growing so fast. But if you sat there and watched that kid for the past hour, you probably would have saw some kind of frustration or something building up within them, that it wasn't really about they spilled their juice or their toy fell off the couch. It's not really about that. It's about whatever was leading up to that, before that, and in that hour of time that you just weren't there staring at them, watching every little thing. Because we see this happen with our kids all the time, where they'll be playing for hours, they're having fun, everything's great, and then somebody will just snap. Oh, yeah. And we're like, what the heck happened? You guys were playing great. But if you were really listening, you could hear it building up. Something was happening, that kid was getting frustrated, they just kept pushing it down, and then finally it's just the bottle exploded and it came out.
I mean, how often is that true about us?
Yeah.
How often do we do that, where it's I'm off working, stressed about something, somebody's a jerk to me, I screw something up, I feel like a failure, I come home thinking I'm okay, and then whether one of the kids is crying or something else happens, or you're snappy with me or something, and then out of nowhere I explode. Yeah. And I yell at you, I yell at somebody, or I take it out. We do it to each other all the time. We do it as well as adults. And so why wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we've gotten to the point where this makes sense. Common-centered presence, right? What if you can't be that common-centered presence? What if you very understandably have your own stuff you're working through, or maybe your kids are actually doing something that is legitimately frustrating and you're having trouble staying calm? I have an answer for this. That's kind of cheating, I guess, when I ask the question and have an answer. But what's your answer to this? What happens when you can't?
Well, it depends on the situation. So if you're not home and I can't say, hey, Locke, I just don't have the capacity
I'm going to kill
deal
one of
with
them.
this. Yeah. I don't have the capacity to do this right now. Can you like help me? I'm really struggling. So hopefully that was what I would do if you were home. Sometimes I don't even have to do that because you can see that I'm struggling and you'll come in and do it anyway. If you're not home, honestly, depending on the age of the kid, there has been days this past week where I was like, listen, guys, I really just don't have the capacity today. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm really struggling. I'm having a hard time. Can you guys just like be easy? Like be gentle with me and like more understanding.
Just be honest with them.
Yeah, like you want to give your kids grace. It's okay to expect them to give you grace once in a while. And sometimes I do need that grace. And sometimes I am just like them, overstimulated, don't have a big bandwidth to handle a lot of things that day. And it doesn't give me permission to like snap at them, yell at them, be a horrible parent. But it's also telling them like, hey, like I struggle too. I'm struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit on two great ideas for different situations. If you're alone, if you're the only parent around, being honest and vulnerable with them. If you're not the only parent around, like if we're both around, it's a team sport. Parenting is a team sport. I think that I always go back to this question of like, if someone else talked to your kids the way you do, sometimes what would you do?
I would like kill them.
Yeah, right. So if somebody else yelled at my kids the way I sometimes do, like I would just walk up and like hit them.
Yeah.
Like there would be no like what's going on, why, like it would no explanation needed. And so it's like there are moments where we do this to each other. There are moments where we hear the way the other person is talking to our kids and it's like disgusting. It's like, no, that's not okay. And so like when you start to see that and you start to approach that, and we kind of hit on this in the beginning, I think, with being able to, you were able to, with love, say, hey, be kind, be gentle. It's kind of the same thing. Like we can't bring our own emotional storm into that, but stepping in and taking over. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Tap in, tap out kind of things. But I think that's really important that you see each other as a team. And instead of you seeing me as some giant adult man losing his cool, you actually see me as the man you love, your partner, your teammate, a giant inner child coming out, and you say, okay, hold on, I got this. The flip side of that, which you didn't hit on, and I will say honestly, openly admit I really struggle with, is allowing you to come do that instead of being like, no, screw you, I got it. And then proceed to make a bigger mess.
Yeah, like there's an ego in there, and there's an ego that you have to let go, and you have struggled with this more than me, and there's certainly things that I struggle with more than you, but in this situation where you just want to handle it, where you're like, no, I got this, like, stop.
Yeah, pride.
And it just makes the situation worse, because then you just make whatever's going on with the child worse, but then we end up fighting.
Yeah. Because then you really do get mad at me. You're like,
because I'm like, no, like, go away. Like, I got this. And so they're seeing this interaction of you and I getting mad at each other. And then also they're seeing the way that you're showing up for them.
Right.
So there is a, like, you got to let go of your ego.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, so the one thing I would add that you didn't hit on is, in my head, I call it the eject button. Like I literally imagine like an eject button from a fighter jet or like a James Bond car where, so if I'm not around, or if you're not around, if it's just me, no one's there to come in and handle the situation. As much as you feel like, oh, I need to deal with this right now, like you don't. If they're about to hurt themselves, like, yeah, you stop them. If they're about to break something, okay. But you don't need to stand there and explode on them right now. You don't need to address the situation immediately if you can't stay calm. I imagine pushing the eject button and like, I have to walk away. And you just spoke to the issue of pride. That is very hard to do. The nice piece of pride is that when I know I'm about to really lose it and I need to walk away, once I do walk away, it doesn't take me very long to be like, okay, get your head out of your ass. and get to a place where I can turn around and come back and handle it. Because to me, I feel like I need to be better than having to walk away. So when I do have to walk away, it's like kind of a reality check. But walking, like if you can't stay calm, then you owe it to your kids to take a break.
Yeah.
If there's no one there to help you, that's not like, if I'm not around to not help you, it's not my fault that I'm not around. It's not a reason for you to be angry at me that you have to handle the kids all by yourself all day. Like, no, you have to step up. And like, let me flip that around, because I'm certainly not accusing you of that at all. If I'm home and I'm like, I can't handle this, where the hell is Ashley? Like, no, that's not how it works. I can't handle this right now. I need to step away until I can get to a place that I can handle it. Because the way that I'm handling it is just making bigger problems that are going to have to be addressed later.
Yeah. Also, something interesting that just came to my thought too is like, don't set yourself up for failure. And I heard this from a coach that I worked with years ago. She said, her and her husband, she said, like, not all parts of parenting is glamorous. And there's going to be certain parts of the day or parenting that you just don't like doing. And like, that's okay. And like, maybe your partner doesn't mind doing that. So like, having situations, like, take yourself out of situations that you don't have to do if you know that you're just setting yourself up for failure and you might get grumpy or angry or not be nice. And like, also let your ego go. Like, sometimes there's certain parts of the day or certain things that we just don't do well at. And I know what those things are for me. I know what those things are for you. And like, don't continue to do those things. Like, say, hey, honey, I really struggle at this time of day. Can you take over this? Like, I really just don't want to do it. And like, it really stinks if both of you guys don't want to do it, but like, who is the better parent for that situation and that thing?
Yeah.
And being okay with like letting that go and letting the other parent take over.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to teamwork. It'd be really easy to be like, well, why do I have to handle this? Like, either why can't you handle this, or there are so many things that you can't handle that you're putting on my plate. And you could probably get resentful about that. You could probably use that as a reason to maybe feel like a victim or feel like your spouse is not pulling their weight. But I think in reality, in a weird way, like they completely are pulling their weight. They are aware of the baggage that they could potentially cause your children.
Yeah.
And they're choosing to take a step back and not cause those issues, not cause those wounds or create that trauma. And from somebody who has not done that, me being someone who has lost my cool with my kids plenty of times and has been working for years not to continue doing that, like, I have a ton of regret about the times that I didn't walk away. So I like doubly urge you to ask your partner for help. If they're not around, take a break, because I know what it feels like to regret losing my cool on all of my kids at different times. And that's way worse than your partner asking you to take some things on because they can't quite handle it.
Yeah. And there's personalities that like think they can do it all. And like, even though they know that they're struggling in certain things, they're like, no, I got it. I'm going to do it. And it's like, no, you don't got it. And maybe you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Last thing I want to add to this, like, teamwork coming in and taking over thing. You can't swoop in and take over the situation if you can't stay calm yourself. So if the greatest gift you can give your kids is a calm and centered presence, and let's say you're not giving them a calm and centered presence, and I see this, I'm like, okay, I need to step in. I can't come say, Ashley, I got it, or tag you out, or whatever phrase we want to use, and then proceed to lose my crap on the kids, right? You need to keep in mind that just because you're coming in to help the other partner doesn't mean that you can lose sight of the goal, which is calm and centered presence.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to add on this?
No.
Okay. I'll throw in one more reminder that I think that this is equally true for relationships as well as parenting. We didn't go too deep on that, but I think all of these quotes could be kind of reshaped to look at your relationships. The kids need you to lend your calm, not add to their chaos. Also true in a marriage with a spouse. It's not our job to stop our spouse from crying. The crying is the healing, not the hurting. That one was big, probably for me and our relationship. I don't know if we used any other quotes, but I would say this is maybe we can do another podcast episode on this same kind of idea between husband and wife, and the differences between how my common-centered presence affects you and how a wife's common-centered presence affects the husband, and what common-centered might mean for each of us, because we are different. There's masculine, feminine stuff, there's personality stuff, there's all kinds of fun stuff there, but that's for another day. I appreciate you guys for coming along on the journey with us today.
Thanks, friends. Hi, friends. If you're enjoying the show, would you please leave a quick rating or review on Apple Podcasts for us? Doing this helps more people find the podcast, which means even more people can benefit from the conversations. We really appreciate you and your time, and thanks, as always, for listening.